Welcome back to our mini-series on meditation and self-development. Last week we've already looked at how to measure ourselves up in terms of 6 personal qualities, which will be the factors which allow us to know whether it would be better to tackle a problem in our personal development or problems in the world around us, or whether it would be better to be patient about it. This week we're going to go a little further in learning how this clear vision about our self-development can help us to overcome some of what we call demons, which can otherwise intervene in our efforts to develop ourselves. If you go to sea, it's said that you have to be prepared to encounter high waves and storms. And in the same way, even if we have a clear vision of our own self-development, sometimes once we get down to the work of improving ourselves, we may find that there are many obstacles which will come in the way of our success. If we are not prepared, or if we don't know what to expect, then sometimes these obstacles can seem like a big or unsurmountable problem in our meditation development. But if we know something more about the nature of these problems, sometimes we can be better prepared. And this is why today we're going to look at what we call 5 demons, which tend to crop up as we make progress in our course of our meditation development. In fact, these demons are originating from weaknesses which we have in ourselves and others. They're the same weaknesses in effect that we are trying to overcome in the course of our self-development. There are weaknesses in our own human makeup, such as weaknesses of the psyche, things like the inability to take fair decisions, or maybe our inability to resist temptation in certain cases, that of perhaps money or fame. And of course there are the weaknesses of our own body, and there's the weaknesses which we find in others around us. We have big expectations of other people, but sometimes we find that we are unable to face up to the untrustworthiness of others, or sometimes we find that we are disappointed when we try to deal with the weaknesses of other people. Also, there are weaknesses in society. We find that in society around us there are many people who like to make profit out of the suffering of others. Things like drug addicts or pests or even alcoholics in society. Sometimes it's difficult to know how to overcome these sort of problems when we are trying to improve our own self-development. But the best thing we can do in the start is to be able to recognize these faults and to know something about the way in which we can protect ourselves from these. Well, let's look first of all at what we actually mean by these 5 demons. And the first demon is what we call the demon of weaknesses in our mind. If you want to know the Buddhist terminology for that, it's kilesa mara. These are the defilements or habits in our own mind which are not good ones. The second of the maras, or the demons, is what we call the weaknesses of the body. And this, in Buddhist terminology, is called khandha mara. This means the faults in the hardware of our body and mind that get in the way of the pursuit of our good deeds. The third one is our own reputation or personal past. In Buddhist terminology, this is called abhisankara mara. And these are some of the bad things we may have in our past, which will spoil our reputation in the present time. The fourth sort of demon is the others around us who may be annoying to us when we are trying to do the work of our self-development. In Buddhist terminology, these are known as the Deva Putta Maras. And last but not least, a very important demon, which is the demon of death itself, or the fear of death, which is known as Majju Mara in Buddhist terminology. So there are these 5 sort of shadows which follow us around everywhere. Whether we try to attempt personal self-development or not, doesn't make a difference to whether we have these maras, because they're going to follow us around anyway. But normally they only show themselves when we come to making an attempt to improve in ourselves. So if you want to prepare yourself for the appearance of these maras, let's look first of all at what they are, and then perhaps see how we can deal with them. The weaknesses of the mind, the first sort of demon, are the images which go through the mind, especially the ones before we do a task or say something aloud. And these images can be affected by what we call kilesa, or defilements in the mind. These are the real demons which are hidden away in our mind, and they tend to belong to 3 different families. 3 families which in fact we've met earlier on in this mini-series, those of greed, hatred and delusion. You may think that these are developed as a result of our society, but they can even be seen in the smallest of babies who, when they're born into the world, they are bawling with greed or anger, or they have ignorance about the world around them. It's something which we bring with us, unfortunately, into the world. But unless we do something about it, then we cannot uproot these defilements, and we suffer increasingly from the influence of these things on our things we say and the things that we do. Mostly, when we are dealing with them, we have to remember that they express themselves in two ways. Firstly, in the decisions which we make, and if we find that we are making biased decisions as a result of the kilesa mara in our mind, then we need to have some standards for making our decisions which will keep our decisions on the straight and narrow. That's something which we're going to be looking a little more at next week. The other sort of way in which defilements tend to express themselves is in the form of temptations. And if we find that we still succumb to temptations to do things which are not actually wholesome or compatible with our self-development, then we do need to develop a little more of the patience which we mentioned last time round. The second sort of demon which we may come across is the demon of the weaknesses of our body, or the Khandha Mara. We may think, for as long as we are healthy, that such a demon doesn't exist for us, but just wait until you get into your old age and you'll start to appreciate some of the weaknesses which you do have built into your body. Even listening to this Meditation for All program relies on many things like having a good sense of hearing and the health to sit up straight and to be attentive. But if even the hardware of your body is affected by your health, then even your attempt to do something good on this occasion by supplementing your knowledge about meditation may be interfered with if you have limits according to the Khandha Mara in your own body or mind. This will particularly affect you if you have diseases which you are confronting. They seriously weaken your ability to be able to do good deeds in your life. So we can reduce our tendency for these to some extent, not to the whole extent I'm sure, because we can avoid old age, but we can especially prevent some of the diseases which tend to occur when we go out looking for diseases to inflict ourselves with, and this is particularly the case when people tend to break what we call the 5 precepts by getting involved in aggression or harming others, stealing or committing acts of promiscuity, or even telling lies and drinking alcohol. I think in the modern day world we all agree that these are ways in which we do undermine our own health. So if we can maintain the 5 precepts, then this is one particularly good way of undermining the strength of the Khandha Mara, which would otherwise destroy our health. The other thing which is useful to avoid is what we call the roads to ruin. And the roads to ruin also include alcohol, but there are another 5 of these, which are those who tend to enjoy the nightlife, especially frequenting the ladies of the night, those who tend to become so addicted to entertainment that they do nothing else all their life, those who are gamblers, those who tend to associate with evil friends, and also those who are too lazy to work. These are 6 factors which we call the roads to ruin, which if you do succumb to these, then again you tend to undermine your own health in many ways, undermine your own ability to do as many good deeds in your life as you might like to. A third sort of Mara which we often come across, something which we have accumulated for ourselves in the past, is that of our reputation. Many items of goodness which we can do in the world, especially if we're going to encourage others to do according to our example, rely on the fact that we have a good reputation. Once you spoil your reputation, then sometimes it's a lot harder to be able to convince others to follow our example. But unfortunately, if you have a black spot in your past, this tends to come creeping back immediately. You try to encourage other people to do good deeds. Ask what you can do about it. Well, there's not much you can do about it later once your reputation is spoiled, apart from trying to make a better reputation for yourself in the future. But if you know that, then you must guard your reputation with great fervor to try to make sure that you can be a model for others to follow in all respects. One thing which particularly affects this is the way you earn your livelihood. If you earn your livelihood in a way which is scrupulous, then that will do a lot to improve on your reputation. But also there are certain livelihoods which you should try to avoid if you want to protect your reputation, things such as the selling of weapons, the selling of people, slaves, or even the flesh trade, as it's called, for the case of things like prostitution, selling things like animals to the abattoir. Even if you don't kill them yourself, but you're selling animals to the abattoir, then you will spoil your reputation as a humane person. Selling alcohol and also selling poisons. Again, these would undermine our reputation as a humane person. So if we can take care of the sort of livelihood which we follow, this is one thing which will contribute to our better reputation. The fourth sort of Mara or demon which we tend to come across is actually the demons personified, which means that the people we are talking about are actually not inside us at all, but they're coming from other people. This is, for example, when you're trying to sit down and meditate in the evening and you hear the sound of a motorcycle going past with the silencer removed, or when you hear the drunk next door shouting and singing when you prefer to be doing your meditation practice, then these are examples of Deva Bhuta Maras who are coming to undermine your efforts to do good deeds. If you ask yourself whether you ever did this to others in the past, then the answer is certainly yes, because if you hadn't done it to them in the past, surely they wouldn't do it to you. But if you would like to improve this situation, it only emphasizes the need for us to reach out to others with our personal practice of self-development so that others may be inspired by our example. It's no good doing good deeds in a vacuum if you don't encourage other people to do them as well. Otherwise, one day, your bad environment will tend to catch up with you. This is why we will come to the factor of social skills and integration in doing our good deeds. It's necessary to be a good friend to others, to encourage them to do good deeds as well, if you really want peace and quiet, for example, when you want to do your meditation. Last but not least is death itself. Death does tend to cut us off in our tracks when we want to do good deeds. Our human life is very valuable to us when it comes to doing good deeds, but if we are cut off in our tracks, maybe by curtailed lifespan, then that is something which we really cannot do anything much about, apart from making sure that we're not so reckless that our life is cut off in its tracks before it's due to do so. But one thing which can be even more frightening from the point of view of death is that some people are so afraid of dying that the fear itself prevents them from doing as many good deeds as they might normally do. We can sometimes meet up with this when we are meditating. We may find things coming up in our meditation which do frighten us so much that they scare us off making any more progress. You hear some people exaggerating. They would say, oh, I feel so many aches and pains that I'd meditate to the death, or I feel so as if I'm dicing with death when I'm meditating. Such complaints indicate that people are not only afraid of death, but they are afraid even of the possibility of death. So if we can overcome that, then at the same time we'll be able to overcome this fifth of the Maras, which is the Mara of death itself. So these are Maras which we may come across in the course of our doing good deeds. One thing which many people tend to do when they try to do good deeds and they don't succeed is to point the finger at other people, try to put all the faults on other people instead of taking responsibility for those faults themselves. But one thing which we do find, and which we can learn from these 5 Maras, is that every time we point the finger at someone else, we find that there are another 4 fingers which are pointing straight back at ourselves. This is exactly the same case as with the 5 Maras. There's only one of the Maras which really comes from other people, and that is the Deva Bhuta Maras. The other 4 of the 5 Maras all come from ourselves in one way or another. So next time we come across obstacles in our meditation or in our practice of self-development, before we go finding fault with other people, we ought to be looking at the faults in ourselves first, because 80% of the possible obstacles to our self-development do come from ourselves. So this week we've taken a look at the 5 demons, which we are sure to encounter every time we make the attempt to do good deeds. Hopefully, if we can identify them and put a name to them, then we will not be so easily discouraged when we meet up with them in the course of our self-development. So next time, we're going to be looking at some of the meanings of the word moderation when it comes to our self-development. In the meantime, Keep up your meditation practice. Hopefully you won't be meeting up with too many of those demons during the week, and I'll see you again in 7 days.